On this week's Bet the Process podcast, Rufus and I are back. I know you guys are excited. You've missed us so much. We've had this real hole in your life that we need to fill now that we're back. So we do a mailbag episode. We talk about some interesting stuff. I think the most interesting stuff we talk about is the idea of a sports betting class for Carnegie Mellon freshmen from our friend Ron Yurko. And then we talk about some golf stuff, and we tell you definitively when Michael Kim is going to have his next tour win. So with that, let's start the process.
Bet the process.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Bet the Process podcast. It is a mailbag episode, a long-awaited mailbag episode, which, we were dark last week. It was a dark time for all of us, but we got through it. So, quick question, follow-up. I'm looking at the Twitter before we get into the mailbag things, and I see that you had this back and forth, or I don't know if it's back and forth, but with Rob Pizzola about the skill to luck ratio at Oakmont. Whether the idea that was like a luck contest and there wasn't a lot of skill and whatnot. We can't let Rob just make carte blanche statements. So should we just jump into your analysis of whether Oakmont was skill versus luck?
Sure. First off, this wasn't even my analysis. This is something that Data Golf provides on their live course insights every week, where they just essentially draw a line, like the slope of how much a player's skill entering the tournament actually impacts their scoring. And so, on a course where, like an average course, that would be 1. But on some courses, you're going to have better players separating more. And basically, this isn't predictive or anything. This is just saying what actually happened in that regard. It's a running regression. And I think Data Golf showed it at 1.32 coefficient, meaning that the average player, if a player was one shot better predicted than another player going into the tournament, they would be expected to have performed 1.32 strokes better. That's basically what we saw. So there was, in essence, 32% more skill involved than an average tournament. So not my analysis. It's very simple, but I think people saw because JJ Spawn won, I think there was the notion that, it's a nobody won, someone who went off at like over 200-1 odds. It must have been luck. But if you look at overall guys at the top, there were some really, really good players up there.
I mean, that's not a way to do an analysis, whether it's luck versus skill. It's like survivor bias or whatever. Like that seems. Maybe I should read what Rob actually wrote. What did he actually write?
I don't know.
This is our version. This is our version of Circles Back, right? Where we're like talking about the meta and challenging Rob. I don't know if he actually even listens to this. What is it? Circles, whatever.
Circle Back. It's actually I listened to it. It's a good show.
Okay, so
I'll be honest. I fast forward a lot of segments, but
I have no doubt it's interesting content and whatnot. I mean, Rob is a professional, obviously, and so is Kurt.
Not just Rob. It's like they have a whole cast of characters.
Is Johnny on it? Because everyone knows
No.
I hate Johnny.
Johnny's not on it.
Just kidding. I don't hate Johnny, but that was the joke for a while. I don't want people thinking
there's actually 2 separate Circle Back shows. There's like the Friday and the Tuesday, and they each have different people on them. So Rob's only on the Tuesday one.
Got it. So it's like a whole franchise now. Do you think they'll do Circle Back for other industries?
I don't know. I mean, they're recapping all the content in gambling Twitter, basically.
Does gambling Twitter need to have stuff recapped though?
There's been a lot of, I don't know. There's been a lot more drama, I feel like, in the last 6 months. And changes in gambling Twitter, I should say, like the elf spaces and like a lot more attention towards grifters. I don't think it's been positive developments. I'll put it that way.
What is the elf spaces? I don't even know what that is. I feel like this is like when I realized that all of a sudden that people were making a lot of money off prop bets and I was like a dinosaur.
Well, Elf is like a content creator who I think he learned using OddsJam how to arb and do plus EV betting with live betting, and he used to stream himself live betting like multiple nights a week. Nothing I ever consumed personally, but and he started these spaces and would have people on, and I don't know if he still does them every night, but they were every night for like 6 hours, going to like 3 a.m. Eastern, and just with a lot of sports betting or gambling Twitter personalities. And he ended up platforming the likes of like Sean Perry, Man in the Library, some people that are sort of well-known scammers. And it's sort of, I think what started as like actually more legitimate conversations kind of devolved into like creating fake drama and just trying to drum up engagement. That's the best recap I can really give.
All right, let's move on from that.
Okay.
What
I wrote down a lot of the tweets that I think that would be good to answer.
can we talk about one more golf thing before we jump into that?
Sure.
Um, Fleetwood, Tommy Fleetwood, as someone holding Fleetwood futures this week, is did he
Wait,
is there?
were you holding Fleetwood futures or two?
Yes, I was also
Okay.
holding Fleetwood futures. I've been holding the winner, the runner up in quite a bit of these tournaments, which I don't know if you know, but outrights don't pay when you hold the winner
Unless
runner
you
up. They
bet the
only
each ways.
what's that?
Unless you bet each ways.
I don't even know what that
Bet
is.
365 has that. So for example, normal would be the terms are well, an each way bet will pay the top six places at 1/5 odds. That's on a normal week. You can do that at Bet 365. Most of the UK books also have each way prices they offer. So half of the bet is the winner, and then half of the bet is the each way part. So being top six at 1/5 odds. So if you got Fleetwood for at 50 to 1, you know, that half your bet is him outright at 50 to 1. And then the other half of your bet is him top six at 10 to 1.
Got it. So sometimes what I do is I'll just bet outright in a top five for shits and
Okay.
giggles, which is essentially like similar in each way. It sounds like. Okay,
Yes, but
so
I would say the one thing with the each ways is that you're getting like it tends to favor long shots more because they divide by a set amount. So cutting the odds by 5 for every player doesn't have the same effect. Because if you think about like where you are in the distribution, like a golfer that's 1,000 to 1 is much more likely to get like 5th place than he is to get 1st place. Whereas like a Scheffler is more likely to get 1st place than 5th place. All right.
no, I get it. Makes sense. Okay, so did Fleetwood is there something to this Fleetwood not winning or like in that last round, obviously he had been playing nails the 2 days previous, right? And and then he played all right in that round, except for I do think like towards the last 5 or 6 holes, he seemed a little choky, meaning like his approach seemed different. He wasn't quite as aggressive and like even that one time he was aggressive, he left himself a pretty big comebacker that he made, but like it didn't seem, again, like you play two really good rounds in a row. It does seem like in golf, a lot of times it's hard to follow that up, but and I don't know how I don't know what any of this
There
means.
isn't any
You
real
study this stuff,
uh,
so tell me about
there isn't any real truth to that. A guy that goes super low. Like if you go
is
really
it more how about this, Rufus?
low,
Is it more is the form?
you're really unlikely to go super low again because it's just really hard to go.
Yeah, no, I know, but is it more predictive that if you had like a great round that you will shoot better than you normally, obviously you're not going to necessarily shoot as well as you did that day, but are you more likely to shoot better than your average or more likely to shoot less than your average?
Well, better than your average. I thought you were going to say like if you had a guy that let's say gained 5 strokes over 2 rounds, and one round was gained 0 strokes, the other was gained 5 strokes. Are you more likely to be worse than if you gained 2.5 strokes each round? But generally, being good, overperforming is correlated with more overperforming because it increases, our assessment of golfers' baseline ability. Plus, it could be picking up stuff on course fit that we didn't get. Like that error term is predictive to some extent, but not a ton. And then also, obviously, teeing off at the very end of the day, there is effective pressure and stuff like that. And as you said, like I didn't actually watch this because I was hiking in Zion, so I had to pull it up after and be like, did Fleetwood win? No, sad. But there is an impact of, I mean, like playing with the lead is difficult for every golfer not named Tiger Woods, basically. And I think and it's not that Tiger Woods played so much better than normal with the lead. He basically just didn't experience the same declines that most players do. And I think one way to sort of really see if a golfer is nervous or not, and is look at their speed on their putts, because that's something that's very much sort of like a feel thing. And if you see guys leaving a lot of putts short, that's generally means they're nervous. And I think that I
Well,
mean,
couldn't you say that just speed putting in general is like because like obviously if they slam one by, it could be because they're nervous also, meaning
right,
like
right. They
that.
just don't have the feel for it.
Right.
Putting is like if you've ever thought, hey, I need to two putt this, or it's a lot harder than if you, right?
I'm bad at golf, so everything's
I
hard for
know,
me.
but the idea of it's the idea of like trying not to mess up versus trying to do well. If you line up a putt and you're like feeling confident that you're going to make it, or I feel like you're much more likely to make that putt than if you're, um, because you're I don't know. At least for me, putting is more of a feel thing, and I think it is for a lot like most golfers not named Bryson DeChambeau, and so it's I don't know. It's like I mean,
Do
it's
you,
not
I
like
mean,
you drafted.
there's no way to really know for sure if this statement of
No, no, but I will say that is what I have found that golfers that tend like a lot well, one telltale sign of playing with nerves is golfers speed putting gets worse.
that you don't know that.
I
What you're
no,
saying
no,
is
I've quantified that.
the
Yes,
skill that tends to fail when golfers are leading is speed putting.
that's one skill. Yes,
Right.
I think
Which
that's
doesn't
probably.
necessarily mean they were nervous. Maybe it does.
I think it does. I think it is.
I mean, I think what I'm just trying to say is like
Look, this
the
wasn't my
empirical
original
what
hypothesis.
you've observed is essentially that the one of the skills that causes people to play worse when they're up is speed putting.
Yes. And I mean, I got this
That's
idea. I
fascinating.
got this idea to test it just from watching Xander over the years and how he performed in final rounds when he was in the lead or like up around the lead. And I was like, Xander, his putting just seemed off a little bit. His speed putting, like, because he's normally a very good putter. And then I like tested it. And what's funny is since then on telecasts, I've heard announcers say, speed putting, that's one sign that you're nervous. And so
Interesting.
it confirmed my finding as well. I mean, I think so. So Tommy Fleetwood, like, yes, he's never won on American soil. He's got a bunch of wins on the European tour, the DP World Tour. He's played really well. He's been a Ryder Cup stalwart for Europe for many years and thrives in that kind of pressure environment. Um, he's won, let's see, I mean, he's won some big European tour events too, like I don't know if he won I think he won the Tour Championship. I don't know if was it the Dubai event. Like it, I'm sure that there is some sort of mental block, a little bit having some impact. But I still think we like labeling these guys as chokers and like we're saying, oh, he's not a choker in Europe, he's just a choker in America. Like that feels a little dumb and kind of picking.
Well, it's not. Again. It's the amount. So let's just boil this down to like real analysis, which is your data has shown that most golfers tend to play worse when they are in the lead, correct?
Correct.
And you would guess that that is based on something mental, right?
Yes,
That mental impact could be more when there is like this seeming narrative or pressure
I
that
agree.
happens. And so right now he does have a narrative and pressure around him about not having won on the PGA Tour. That doesn't mean that he's necessarily a choker on one tour versus the other. That just simply means that right now in his head there is something that is causing him to play worse potentially in these situations, and that resonated with. He did have poor speed
Feeling
putting
more pressure, probably.
generally had poor speed. Like he opened the round with I think 2 out of 3 bogeys, which are all based on poor speed putting.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he's clearly going to be more nervous for the final round of an elevated PGA Tour event than a European Tour event where he knows he's won those before and there isn't this big monkey on his back. Now, the,
Yeah.
the thing is though, all this like this clutch play stuff is It's great in terms of, it's certainly explanatory. I mean, like, I don't think you can argue that pressure didn't have something to do with his collapse. Like, it clearly did. But how do we anticipate that having an impact going forward? And that's what's really hard to quantify. And I think that every time we find like a guy where there's that narrative, like think about Xander last year before he won the PGA, like there was that narrative that Xander just couldn't close. And then he wins the PGA and then he makes that
That's what I'm saying. Like,
barely. And then he
let's
goes and wins the Open Championship. And then another guy, Tony Finau, like, he was in the mix so many times without winning for years. And then he won, I think it was the 3M Open was his first win.
and
Or
then he
maybe it
won the
was,
next week again,
and
right?
maybe it was Detroit and then the 3M Open. But right, he won back-to-back weeks. It's like he got the monkey off his back and then boom. I mean, but I feel like there are guys that over, like I've sort of tried to test this out, and you do see some like differences in terms across players that are more than randomness would suggest in terms of how well guys play with the lead. But the thing is, they don't actually really persist, meaning that you kind of learned there's a non-stationary aspect to it. It's dynamic. A guy, just because a guy has been bad in clutch moments doesn't mean he's going to continue to be bad. Like maybe he starts seeing a sports psychologist. Like, you can improve in that area. And though it feels like the exception to me there is like Sergio, who's occasionally gotten a few wins, but like the guy is his whole career, his, you know, I think he's kind of the upper echelon of the chokers.
Okay, enough about choking in golf. Speaking of golf, when is Michael Kim's next win going to be? Isn't that pretty funny that he
Yeah,
responded
that
with
was
that?
great.
Yeah, yeah.
That was great.
When is his next win going to be? Did you look at the analysis and see?
I didn't actually run any
I mean, he's
simulations.
playing this week in a relatively weaker field, so maybe this is a chance for him to
How
win.
about this? Jeff, what would you put the over under in number of, I don't know, I was going to say days, years, weeks, events until he gets his next win?
I mean, I think we would say years, right? So
I mean, it's just really hard to win on the PGA Tour. That's not an indictment of him.
I bet Michael Kim because he was playing really well at the beginning of this year, right? I mean, he had like a nice run. Um,
Like I make
and
him, for
he's still
example,
relatively young, right? He's like late 20s.
like Max Homa's age, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, because I know they were teammates. That's at Cal. He's 31, so he's in
Ooh,
prime.
he's starting to go on the downside of his career.
I made him 80 to 1 this week. I mean, the market is anywhere. I'd say the market average is around like 65, 70 to 1. Um, and this is not an elevated event. This is I don't want to say it's not that weak of a field. You got some good guys, but like I would say a little bit worse than average in terms of field quality. But I think if we assume that he's going to be on average 80 to 1 for every event he plays, then his next win maybe in 2 years.
He's going to be more than 81 in a lot of events he
He
plays.
will. But if he plays like an event like the Mexico Open or something like that, and he's playing well at that time, he'll have an event where he's going off at like 30 to 1 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on what he plays. Like
I'll say the over under is a year and a half.
I would sadly I
You
would
take
take I
over.
would take the over there. I would take the over, but
Okay. That is sad.
I'm sorry, Michael.
We're sorry. Thanks for hopefully you listen and you feel
Hopefully he doesn't listen.
you feel really encouraged by our analysis of your ability to win.
Like at the same time, if you asked me that for like a lot of golfers, it would be kind of the same. It's just really hard to win.
I'm running through these and you can jump in when you want, but like how excited are we to host our podcast live from
Yeah.
Bet Bash?
Yes.
Do we want to
It'll be our first live podcast we've done since 2020, the infamous COVID podcast where
we're not Rufus, we're not allowed to talk about that.
Oh, okay,
We're
sorry.
not allowed to talk about that. If you ever want to be able to go to Sloan again, we can't talk about that. Okay, so
Wait. Why don't we brainstorm a little bit while we're here? What we want to kind of
no, that's what I was about to say. Like, what do we want to actually do with that? I mean, we should probably find someone that's going to be there that we've never interviewed before and interview them. Someone
we could even have
interesting.
multiple guests if we wanted.
Ooh, multiples? Are you into
Mhm.
multiples? Um, I don't know. Who would you want to have on? Like,
Let's
can we get some
put me on the spot.
suggestions from people that are going to be there that either think they're interesting that they should be on our podcast or suggestions of people that people know will be there? I mean, we're on like a little bit of a dearth for guests. I mean, we were struggling a little bit over the last time we had the AI guy, which might have been a plus EV move for us because you're going to get into this golf challenge with him. We should check in with him to see if he's ready to
Yeah.
have that. But I feel like that was a very plus EV move for us to potentially have him on and taunt him into a challenge with you. That it seems like a lot of people that listen to our podcast really want to get on the Rufus train for that.
Why don't we sell some equity in me to podcast listeners if they want?
I want to sell some equity in our Calcuttas. I'm like shocked at how many people ask us if we're going to broadcast these Calcuttas live because it's like people really do want to see them, which it's pretty awesome that they feel that way.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder how much people would have paid to see me, cry watching that U.S. Open with you and wanting to shoot you with a
Yeah,
gun.
you were, but you still made money in the Calcutta, and you made money in the Calcutta before that, so I can't feel that bad for you.
You don't have to feel that bad for me. It was just a very painful amount of watching golf for 2 hours because like my golfers just didn't do anything good for 2 hours, which is just not that fun.
I mean, the Calcutta Sundays, it's you can be looking great, and then suddenly, like I was for the
No, but usually you get a little bit of like a little bit of hope, a little dopamine here and there. I literally had like 2 hours of no hope.
no birdies, but I mean, to be
No, it
fair,
wasn't even birdies. It was like no par saves, no nothing. It was just I
uh,
mean, Sam Burns went 8 over that day, right? So it's
yeah,
that's real. Or 7 over. I think it was 7 over.
I think
Okay.
it was 8, and then Scott went 9 over. I feel bad for Martin who had Adam Scott there, and that's just like
That was
that's pretty brutal.
an ejection for the
I felt
ages.
bad for myself too, having Scott for like top rest of world, top 5, top 10.
Yeah.
He still won top Oceania though. So I got that going for me.
Okay. So we'll figure that out.
Okay, do you want to just go back and forth with questions? Because I have some
But the other thing too, Rufus, like just that I sent you that date for the golf thing,
uh-huh.
which is August 23rd and 24th at Silverado. So people can play in this charity event. And Rufus, you got to make sure you're going to be there if we're going to tout this. But like we have like tee times. We can get tee times at Silverado on the 23rd. So we could actually do like a bet the process. Like if people are going to come to that event anyways and do the charity scramble the next day, we can actually do like a bet the process open, and maybe what we do is we get some listeners that want to come and then you and I can do a draft and we have like our own Ryder Cup.
Oh,
Like
I
where
love this
me,
idea.
yeah, where me and like we got to like do this interviews with these listeners or whatnot. But if a few people have emailed me I will send you the information, but it's August
Tweet
23rd
this
and
out.
24th. What?
Tweet this out.
Tweet
You'll
it out?
tweet it out?
Yeah, we'll tweet it out.
Yeah, and I'll
Okay.
retweet.
And it's a charity event on the 24th, but on the night of the 23rd, we could actually and we have dinner at Ad Hoc that night. I know that you're big on Napa now because you were a Napa aficionado, willing to throw money left and right at the problem. Okay, moving on from that, let's go to your answers. You have some answers, right?
I
You have
do.
some questions.
Yeah,
You've
let's
done
start.
some work.
I've done my own
You're like
research.
Kobe. You're doing work.
So the one I found the most interesting was from at even Steven GG. He says, "At what point do we believe AI will catch up with those who create sports betting models, i.e., they adjust for team news, injury, etc., faster than slash equal to humans running projections? We aren't there yet, but LLMs like ChatGPT can do some interesting stuff when you plug in sports betting odds on totals slash spreads to get derivative lines." And to answer this question, I actually asked ChatGPT. Well, what I asked it though, because so I firmly believe that LLMs are not designed to build good predictive models. That's not like that's it's a better predictive models is going to come from a different kind of AI. And this is what I asked ChatGPT basically, if I'm correct in this sort of assumption. I asked, why do LLMs struggle with predictive models? Meaning models that use very granular data sets, where to build a really good model that could beat the market, you need to build very good features that are predictive rather than explanatory, contextualize them for all sorts of different factors, such as weather, opponent strength, etc. And then in many cases, creating simulation engines that simulate the flow of a game after building great predictive metrics. And then I said, second question, should I think of the advancement of LLMs as something that won't actually advance predictive models in the same way? And ChatGPT says LLMs are pattern recognizers trained on text, not simulation engines or traditional predictive systems. They struggle, and here's why they struggle in the domain you described. They don't train on structured data. They lack, and there's more detail in these, but they lack direct access to numerical optimization. They don't inherently build or learn features. They just repurpose language patterns they've seen. They don't simulate forward. They don't optimize for market-beating performance. And so basically, what ChatGPT says is think of predictive modeling as a glass box engine built for optimization and accuracy, and LLMs as black box assistants trained for fluency and recall. So the advancement of LLMs will likely not meaningfully advance the core logic of predictive models, especially in high performance edge-seeking applications like betting, but they will likely revolutionize the workflows around them, like cleaning data, writing simulation code, parsing unstructured info, or assisting with feature brainstorming. So that kind of confirmed what I had thought. And so I still,
There's got to be like a further advancement in AI.
yes.
So there's a new type of model that's better and more designed for creating predictive models.
Right. Like right now, it's going to help you build models. If you're like, hey, I want to build this model and do it this way, or you're like, hey, I want to do this with this, it can give you ideas for it, but it's not going to just take all this.
You really just said do this with this.
Yeah.
And you get paid for this analysis. Do this with this. So, okay. I like that. It's a good answer.
And I think this is relevant to some of the discussions we had, obviously with our AI guest before. And I know there
Can neither of us remember his name at this point? It seems almost insulting. Literally can't remember his name.
No, but
and it's funny, like people are like, you must have got paid for that. And we're like, no, we didn't. So the joke's on us. Is the joke on us? The joke's kind of always on us.
Anyhow, moving on. I think that there also was this discussion on, I think it was on Twitter and then circled back on whether AI in 8 years would be able to beat my golf betting model now.
I mean, it's just dumb. This is like, let's kind of like, we're done with this.
Okay, we'll move on.
I like if I could go a day without talking about AI, I'd be happy. Okay, if current day and skill Scotty played the entire year on the Corn Ferry Tour, how many wins would he have out of 26?
So this morning I tried to do a little rudimentary. Well, I was like, let's just simulate him against the Corn Ferry Tour field this week and see how he would do. And I can't, because it is a Corn Ferry Tour event, and like I haven't gone and figured out what the scoring environment is. I know it's going to be easier, and that'll clearly impact things. But basically, I would, and I had to take some shortcuts. But basically, I have Scheffler as like he'd be 50% to win this week. And so
he'd win 13 events.
It's probably going to be a little bit lower than that, because what you're going to have is other players having more course familiarity than he does. Although he did play on the Corn Ferry Tour for a year, so he will have played some of these courses, so he won't be at as much of a disadvantage necessarily there. But so I think he'd be a little bit worse off. And I think the other thing is the fact, like, Scotty is really, really elite around the green. And if you're playing a bunch of easy courses, that's kind of going to neuter that skill a little bit.
Well, so that's just generally like the idea that if he played the Corn Ferry people on a PGA course, he would win more times.
Yes, I think so, because harder courses, you're going to separate skill more typically.
Well, but then isn't that answer to like going back to Rob Pizzola's thing, like the harder the course, the more skill involved generally?
Yeah, in general, that's the case, because I mean, a really simple way of looking at it is the more shots you hit, the more you're going to separate the better from the worst players. Right?
Okay.
If you had 19 holes, you'd expect the better players to separate more.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Um,
Ron, let's
definition?
go to Ron Yurko. I mean, Ron Yurko is an
Okay.
interesting guy that follows us and
Yeah,
has been engaged with us. So he's an assistant
he's a really
teaching
smart guy.
professor. He's a director. We could have him on. We
He'd
could
be
have
a
him on
great guest.
sometime.
I,
Yeah,
I think we
director
should
of
have him on.
Carnegie Mellon Sports Analytics. Sounds like he's a nerd, but whatever. Just kidding, Ron. We're all nerds. All right. So what was his question? Do
So
you
he
want to?
says, I'm developing. I encourage people to look at his tweet here because he posted a screenshot of the sort of the syllabus of this course. But he says, I'm developing
I
what
don't
I'm
think that's the syllabus. The
not
syllabus is usually
syllabus. Sorry, just the
the description.
yeah description. Sorry, not a syllabus.
Yeah.
I'm developing what I'm referring to as a sports betting safety slash awareness class for freshmen at CMU next spring. Title and description and image. I'm co-teaching with a cognitive neuroscience prof, but what would you want to see in this type of course? So I guess we can look at this both from like a cognitive neuroscience or like psychology perspective, as well as a statistics
Well, I mean,
perspective.
I would like want to understand if you're doing like the neuroscience part, I'd want to understand like the activations around addiction and around
Dopamine.
dopamine hits and like
Yeah.
what that cycle, because like the whole concept of being a degenerate, right, is around dopamine. And
Yes.
I think one thing that would be interesting is how your brain reacts to losing versus winning, how your brain reacts to the chase, i.e., like that feeling you get. Let's say you lose a bet, and again, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I certainly have. You lose a bet, and you're like kind of just like when you're like on tilt or something, right? Like you have like a moment where you're on tilt, and then when you make your next bet, your tilt almost goes away for a minute because you have this hope.
You're getting the dopamine.
You're
Yeah.
well, you have this hope that you're going to be able to recoup that bet, and then that's like what the why the tilt happens, right? Because you go on this string of betting, and really the real test of like in my mind of a degenerate versus not is like whether you are willing to basically at that point make negative EV bets with the idea like if you no longer care about getting positive EV because you just want to be back in the race or whatever you call it,
Yeah, the
back in
dopamine
the
thing is
game.
interesting because I mean it's I think I believe more dopamine is released in anticipation of the thing itself
Oh wow,
than
that's
from
interesting.
the actual thing, I
Can you
believe.
track? I mean, this is a
So
dumb question. Is it easy to track dopamine?
I don't think so, but I mean I don't know. I mean I'm sure yes, not me or you, but I think they can. They can measure
You
that.
don't have a dopamine meter
Not
on your Whoop. You don't have a dopamine meter.
But what's
Or
interesting, Jeff, is I think awareness of this would be I think awareness itself is useful. It's almost like therapy, right? Like in
I mean,
therapy,
awareness that I was
your
gonna say like
own
that goes,
and
self-work, awareness of, yeah, agreed.
but so I did this relationship workshop thing at Esalen, and what a big one thing that I really learned was about dopamine and the impact of dopamine on like the sort of falling in love and the dating and all that. And I realized that like realizing that sort of these that it is like a chemical thing that I'm getting when like early on, and but that awareness has actually been really useful for me. And so I feel like it could be similarly useful to understand why your body's reacting the way it is to, a losing bet. And so I think that part, I think that would be really interesting. I think on the more stat side, I think, understanding the math behind parlays and just in essence using parlays to illustrate the magic of compounding, and edges compounding for the house, or edges compounding for you if you have an edge in each leg, which I think generalizes well beyond sports betting. I think a lot of people don't fully grasp how important and how important compounding really is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it is interesting, the understanding of odds generally, right? This is like the whole concept of like casinos and like if people really understood the odds of roulette, would they play roulette? I mean, I don't know. Would they? Would like I understand the odds of playing
You do.
craps and I still play craps, right? But I know, yeah. I mean, I again, like this is like way back in the day when I had no idea that Fox Business was or Fox was a political show or whatever, I used to do Fox Business and I used to be on Stuart Varney. And we were talking about Macau, and they were saying like how Macau had surpassed Vegas in terms of gambling revenue for the first time. This is, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that. And he looked at me on air on live television and was like, Jeff, can you tell me why the Chinese are such big gamblers? And there is just this like spirituality or believing in a higher being that you have this like delusional nature. Like are Buddhists more gamblers
I would
than
think Buddhists are
non-Buddhists?
less gamblers,
Fewer
fewer
gamblers?
gamblers.
Fewer gamblers?
I
I
would
don't
think
know. Anyways, there's just this idea like you have to create some you know
meaning.
well, you just have to like delude yourself and suspend like your analysis or your real belief in numbers. Because obviously, like if someone told me, "Hey, we're gonna play this craps game, and every time you throw the dice, you're gonna, you put $1 up, and if you roll, basically like creates this very clearly negative EV game." I wouldn't want to do it, but there's all this subterfuge. I'm like, oh yeah, cool.
What?
The fire bet, blah blah.
I was listening to the Matthew McConaughey book, Green Lights, on my drive back from Bryce Canyon yesterday. And it was interesting him talking about betting. He says, he likes to bet on sports and, you know, he doesn't use tout services because he believes that he should have said he doesn't use tout services because they don't win, but he doesn't use tout services because he believes that the satisfaction he gets from being right, like that's what he's chasing. But he mentioned what he loves is like the time where he realized that this player being injured and the team rallying around them after that game, like he had that sort of thought there, or this team being jet lagged going from the West Coast to the East Coast. I thought actually he said what East Coast to West Coast, which but the idea that like these, as he said, things that the Las Vegas line makers can't quantify, which I think he meant more the market, but that's sort of that same sort of thing. Like he was saying what he likes is the trying to find meaning and finding these things that are not that you can't put numbers on, but you're like, I feel like this time this will have an impact, right? I mean, the suspension of sort of like, I don't want to say it's suspension of rationality in a sense, but it's
Well, I
like
mean, I think there's two types of. So, okay, going back to the concept of this class, I think this class is a great idea, and because I think it highlights a very interesting sort of
maybe,
bias behind us, where if you get like really smart people that understand statistics, which I'm sure at Carnegie Mellon has in spades,
yeah.
how do you teach them about something that is potentially dangerous, like sports betting, by framing it in a way that is academic instead of recreational, right? And then at the same, like I almost think like I don't know how like how to construct a course, so I'm not going to tell Ron how to do it, but like I do think like the two pieces are very they diverge, i.e., like the neuroscience thing is a totally different thing than this thing. Although maybe not. Maybe
I
they can
like having
converge.
them together. I
Maybe
like
they
having
can
both those
converge in like an
perspectives.
understanding of yeah. I like it. Okay, so I think it's a good idea. Maybe he'll come to Bet Bash, and we can discuss this at Bet Bash because I think that would be actually like that would actually be a
That would be amazing.
very that would be a very I would feel like that was a good use of our time at Bet Bash if we can educate some of the people there about the hazards in betting, right? I think that is like that's almost like the sort of like the having GA at that or something like that. Like
Mhm.
it's a reasonable use of our time there, which is really like what I want, right? And
Yeah,
maybe should we do a dinner at Delilah the night before? Maybe like
yeah, that sounds great. Let's
I think
definitely do
that
that.
sounds delicious.
Okay, next question. It's from at Manuel Bets 2. Have you read any good books recently? Any that are not necessarily betting related, but that have helped your betting work? You want to go first?
Do you read books
Yeah, I actually am reading three books right now.
at the
Um,
same time?
well, kind of, yes. one of them, I wouldn't say any directly helped my betting. Like there's the Green Lights, Matthew McConaughey. I was listening to that because I was driving back from Bryce, and I don't think that my friend wasn't as interested in the other book I was reading, Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel, which is interesting. Um, but the book, I actually just bought this at a bookstore in Berkeley last Friday. It's
Lib.
the diaries. It's called Madly Deeply. It's the diaries of Alan Rickman from I believe it's 1993 to 2015. The actor who was he was the German terrorist in Die Hard. He was Severus Snape in the Harry Potter franchise. He was in Love Actually. He's been in so many movies. Great actor who passed away, I believe, like 8 or 9 years ago. But I feel like what's funny is none of this like directly impacts betting, but I think it makes me all this reading all this stuff makes me think more and in ways that I think do indirectly help my betting. And I think almost the best thing I can do to help my betting is think about other things.
I don't read books nearly enough. The last book I read was, well, I started reading that Mark the Caddy's book because I thought we were going to have Mark the Caddy on, and I was interested in reading a little bit of his book. And then I recently read Setting the Table, which is Danny Myers. Do you know who he is? He's the guy that did Gramercy Park, the restaurant, and Shake Shack,
Oh,
and it's a fascinating
okay.
um, it's a fascinating book about hospitality and entrepreneurism and whatnot. But the book that I just got recommended to me by my CEO is called American Triumvirate, and it's Sam Snead, Byron Nelson, Ben Hogan in the modern age of golf, and it kind of talks through the history of them and their impact on the sport. I heard
Interesting.
it's
I
very
read a
good.
book. I read a book about I forget what it was called, but and someone will I'm sure tell me, but it was essentially about 18 holes played in
Oh, it was like at the one at Cyprus, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I forget the name of that book. Also,
I
we're
feel like
not
I
very
learned this
helpful.
because it folded in like the backstory of like Byron Nelson and like and a few other guys, and I feel like I learned so much golf history from it.
Okay, we got to
Okay,
figure out the names of
I
other.
have some more questions,
All right,
Jeff.
do a couple more, and then I got to go back to my conference that you
Do you want me to?
previewed
Do
for
you
me.
want me to? I'll go through quickly, I guess.
Sure.
Someone's at first TD guy says, is there any edge to be gained using traditional strokes gain stats for golf betting, or at this point has that advantage been erased? I would say, like, if you're just saying, oh, strokes gained approach, probably there isn't much to be gained there that the market is incorporating. But I think with all of these, it's just about how you slice the data and asking the right questions. Like if if have theories, test theories, right? But just that using that one number, like strokes gained approach, I don't think there's any advantage there. At
By the way, the book is called The Match: The Day the Game of Golf Changed Forever by Mark
Yes,
Frost. Maybe we'll have Mark Frost on sometime.
that'd be cool. At Jar Faka, I don't know. What
Jar Jar
amount,
Binks.
what amount, Jar Jar Banks, what amount of edge do you need to bet? I'm assuming it varies by market. Um, yes, it very much varies by market. I'll have sort of and
And
time and
time
market
of the market.
resistance. I mean, somebody told me a story, someone who worked for a big betting syndicate in the past where they said they would like send plays to a mover and they would be normally getting like 20 or $25,000 a play. And occasionally they get filled for 70,000. And they just so happen to not to be losing on the $70,000 plays and winning on the $20,000 plays. And I mean, it right there, like it's a lesson in market resistance. If you're able to continue to get down more, it's dangerous. And I was talking to my Australian friend from my whitewater rafting trip, who basically said like if something is too easy to bet to get a lot down, like that's a huge red flag. It should be hard to
Oh,
get down.
I know which Australian friend you're talking about.
So I think it all varies there. Let's see. At Sharp's research, model edge versus closing lines. Beyond the basic economics approach of tracking R squared between features and market odds, how do you detect when your model's edge is decaying or structurally breaking?
Ooh, good
This is a
question.
great question. And I think it is very, very difficult to do. I'd say like first off, I notice if my edges are getting smaller and I have fewer bets. Like that's sort of saying the market is more efficient, but that's not saying that my model is less predictive necessarily,
Fewer predictive.
fewer predictive. And so I think that the harder part is figuring out if there is something that makes your model less predictive relative to the market. If the market is incorporating data, like new data maybe that you don't have. And so I think by the time you're using any sort of statistical technique to try to figure that out, like some regression, it's probably going to be too late. And so a lot of it is kind of just being on the lookout. Is there new data that I'm not using? And like looking and seeing, am I getting less market agreement than I used to? These sort of things kind of trigger warning signs for me to like look into something. Uh,
Uh, okay,
Can we
makes
keep
sense.
going here? I have
Well, I want to answer this one. How many
yep,
professional sports teams properly use analytics? It's from Ace to
AC
Cardano.
Cardano.
IMO, too many of these decisions seem based on more on undergraduate statistics and groupthink, cover your ass, than true analytics. I mean, undergraduate statistics would be fine. I don't think a lot of it is. I think it is more groupthink and CYA, but I don't think that's because the sports teams don't have people that run analytics. I think almost every sports team has someone that's doing analytics now, with the
For
exception of
sure.
maybe like the Lakers. And actually, the Lakers do now. They were at Sloan. But you know it if you go to Sloan, because there's all these people that are from teams there that are, highly decorated in some kind of education. But I think the challenge is, and again, this is the challenge with even just the AI revolution. It's how do you get people in an organization, at any organization? It's not just sports; it's business. Obviously, like I work in business, or my business is a sport, I guess technically golf, and so much of the challenge is not building better stuff, right? Not even just AI or analytics. It's getting people to think differently about employing or using that better stuff, right? Which is ultimately one of the more fascinating things that I think about is how do you create change management in an industry and organization that's been doing something the same way. And ultimately, like, this is the challenge with having non-diverse teams. Like, if you have a diverse team, meaning like people from different backgrounds, not necessarily people that look different, you can get better diversity of thought, and it's easier to get people to move forward and accept different things. So anyway, so my point is that this is less about analytics and more about organizational philosophy. And I'd be curious if our friend Cade Massey would agree with me on this. But I think
I,
he
I
would.
I bet he would. And I would say on the like quote statistics analytics side, first off, I hate the term analytics because it's like just
You and Charles Barkley, you both
it's a
hate
framework.
analytics.
It doesn't, I
You
mean, the
hate
word on
analytics.
its own means nothing to me, but I think so much of it's not about like what techniques you know as much as it's about like obviously you need to have some background there, but it's about how you think about the problem
Yeah.
and thinking creatively. And so I think that's where the edges are to be gained in general. And then obviously having, as you said, having a process and organization all on the same page and buy-in and all that. Um, at Big Ten Watto, how many inputs is too many inputs into a model? Does something really matter if it only carries 1 to 5% of the weighting among your inputs? I like this question just because I don't think of it. I don't I don't think it's exactly the right question to be asking necessarily. I think if you're just putting a bunch of features into some sort of machine learning or just regression based model and this one only has a 1 to 5% weight, like and you don't have something that is, I don't know if it's more of a kitchen sink approach and not something more well thought out than like 1 to 5, and it's collinear, related to other variables, then 1 to 5% is probably not worth that much. But the way I think of it isn't that way. I think of it as about doing the little things well at the intermediate stages, contextualizing better. And so like I do a lot of things that have like in essence make things like 1 to 5% better, which isn't the same as 1 to 5% weight exactly, but and then it kind of shows up at that final product.
Okay. Last question. You got one more?
Um, sure, I can do one more here. At Steed 90, when you have a potentially unknown course fit like Oakmont, is there a benefit to either leaning into players who are above average everywhere Ortiz, Olison, Hatton, Mav types, or players with defined skill sets, batter up or Rye types? I like this question just because I think it differs depending on what you're trying to bet too. And like I don't think Oakmont was that unknown. I mean, it's hosted it's hosted a lot more opens before, but two since what it was 2007, 2016. Like so two where we have a good amount of data and like at least I have like like a lot of data on. And so but in general, if there is, I think when there is an unknown course, I think that you certainly can say, okay, our mean expectation is maybe no course effect or something, but I think it's worth thinking about the different scenarios. And especially if you're, I guess the bet type makes a big difference there. So if you see a world where like this course just favors really accurate players, suddenly Aaron Rye's ceiling is a lot higher. Right? Or a world where it just favors really long players, right? And then so that essentially would increase the variance on a guy like Rye who'd be penalized in that situation. And so I think it really does depend on what markets you're betting and because there is this whole sort of spectrum of how the course could play. So I mean a lot of it is I guess looking through the different scenarios that you think are possible.
Okay, that's it. That's
All I
our
got.
mailbag episode. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too.
And I didn't give you shit at all. So
Appreciate
take
that,
the
Jeff.
under. So
I mean,
talk to you guys.
More than 3 minutes of shit in the last week, though.
No, that's actually not true. I gave you all the shit right at once, and then I was done with it. And
I appreciate you flushing it.
Yeah, there you go. Anyways, all right. Talk to you guys all again next week. Where hopefully we'll have a guest.
Bet the process.